Right, welcome to Rugby Borough Council Planning Committee meeting on Wednesday the 5th of November. I'm Councillor Neil Sanderson, Chair of the committee. The meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, when asked to speak, please use the push button in front of you on the microphone, and this will allow the camera to pan in your general direction and for everyone to hear you. There is no fire drill scheduled for this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask you to make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the Town Hall and congregate in the entrance to Caldecott Park. An officer of the Council will give instructions on when it is safe to return. Should you have a disability or mobility problems, can you please indicate and we will get the superintendent or a member of staff to assist you. Moving to the agenda. To approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 8th of October. Are members happy that is a correct and accurate record? Can I have a proposer?
Happy to second that, Chair. Thank
you, Councillor Vicker. And Councillor Freeman, you're seconding it. Thank you. I can now sign the minutes. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Harrington tonight, with Councillor Moran here as a substitute.
Welcome, Councillor Moran. Declarations of interest. Are there any non-pecuniary interests?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Freeman.
The application in relation to the old doctor's surgery at Borough is in my ward, New Building, Brownsover, and this particular site has formed part of my casework in recent months. I don't feel it's appropriate for me to take part in any decision relating to it.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Councillor Simpson Vince.
Thank you, Chair. R250653. I'm a resident in Holton.
Thank you. Councillor Stavstra. That's on the Brownsover application. Thank you. Councillor Picker.
R25/0653 Ward Councillor.
Councillor Russell.
Same R250653 Board Councillor.
Are there any more? Councillor, carry down.
Also, GP surgery falls into my county council area division.
Is that a ward
I'm
interest?
the county councillor for that area.
Right. Okay. Right. Thank you. Pecuniary interests. Do you have any of those? No. Notice under Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act, non-payment of community charge or council tax. No, we've all paid. Thank you. Applications for consideration. We're going to do application R25/003 first. Second will be R25/0653, and lastly we'll do application R240978. Could I ask the officer to do their presentation on the first application?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you, Chair. This is a full planning application for the change of use from a healthcare surgery to a church with ground floor side extensions, first floor extensions, plus a new car parking area to the rear off Bowfell at the former doctor's surgery of 41 Bowfell in Brownsover. The application has been called to Planning Committee by Councillor Livesey on the grounds of inadequate parking provision and the pressure that this may result in. The site relates to the former Brownsover surgery and the adjacent grass area. The site has been vacant for approximately 10 years, following the closure of the surgery and the building of a new one next door. The application building forms part of a complex of commercial and community buildings centred around a public sort of car park area. The surrounding buildings comprise of a church to the north, residential properties to the northeast, a doctor's surgery, which is a new build one to replace this one, to the south, a public car park and commercial premises to the southwest. Here we have a selection of photographs for context. The existing Christchurch building is here. To the side of that is the former doctor's surgery that the application is on tonight. Behind there, across both fell are residential dwellings. To the south of the site is the new Brownsover Medical Centre. And then this photograph is the other side where there used to be the former public house, which is now Tesco Express, and a range of other shops and facilities there. And here are a range of more photographs closer up of the actual building in question that the application relates to tonight. Planning Permission was previously granted in December 2020 for a similar proposal to extend the building at both the ground and first floor levels and convert the building from the medical centre doctor's surgery to a church, and this permission, though, has now lapsed. This scheme will comprise of a single-storey rear extension, a front gable canopy extension, an increased roof height and a front dormer extension, together with replacement windows and doors and renders to certain elements. There will then be a new drop curb off accessing onto Bow Fell, then to access then the 5 parking spaces that are being provided within the site, and a bin store as well, and this will be on the existing grassed area. In a little bit more detail, you can see this is the current existing proposed front elevation, and you can see they're extending the roof line across to increase the floor space on the first level. They're then at the rear elevation extending it out, and in terms of then the elevations to the north and south, they will look respectively in the images below. In a plan form, what this basically shows is actually squaring off the existing building to create a large sort of congregational hall on the ground floor, and it also allows an expansion of the first floor to create a sort of a dining area and kitchen. There have been technical consultation responses on the application, but none of them raise any objection, although both the ecology section and highway section have requested conditions if the application is approved. No third-party comments have been received. The principle of the development is acceptable on the basis that the site lies within the Rugby urban area as defined by Policy GP2 as that is the main focus for all development within the borough. Policy HS3 of the local plan opposes proposals that would result in significant or total loss of a community or cultural facility or service. The previous doctor's surgery, as mentioned, has been accommodated elsewhere next to the site and opened in 2019. The proposed use of the site as a place of worship now would also benefit certain parts of the community. Therefore, as I mentioned, the principle is acceptable. From a design point of view, policy obviously ensures that all schemes must be of a high quality and inclusive and sustainable design, and that actually then respect the character and appearance of the area. We feel that the extensions and alterations are coherent with the design and appearance of the existing building and the surrounding area. However, the building as it stands today, due to the deterioration of it, is not considered to positively contribute to the character of the surrounding area. Materials will be used to reflect those of the existing building and surrounding buildings, but they will be controlled via a condition if approved. There will be obviously a loss of the existing grass area on site, but this will be mitigated by further landscaping. And therefore, the design elements is considered to accord with policy. In terms of residential amenity, it is considered that based on particularly the distances of properties across the road, there will be no significant concerns relating to residential amenity impacts on those adjacent residential properties, but also on adjacent community and commercial buildings. There will also be no significant loss of light impact on those particularly Bowfell dwellings based on the bulk of the extensions being to the south at the first floor level, and then obviously single-storey elements to the eastern elevation towards those residential properties. Therefore, it is considered that the relationship of the design of the property and the window locations will be of a nature that is acceptable. Now turning to highways and safety and parking. Policy D2 of the local plan states that permission will only be granted for development which incorporates adequate and satisfactory parking facilities. The County Highway Authority has no objection, subject to two conditions. One, that the actual plan has been submitted with the proposed site plan is laid out in accordance with those details, but also that the public highway footpath crossing is laid out and constructed in accordance with highway standards. The existing site doesn't have any designated on-site parking and relies on the adjacent public car park that is next to the site. The previous approval back in 2020 granted a similar scheme and also included 6 parking spaces on site. This latest scheme only provides 5, but that's because they've now actually accommodated a bin storage area as well. The council's parking standards require 23 spaces for the proposed church use as it stands at the moment. But however, if the use of the lawful doctor's surgery just reopened again, that technically requires 24 spaces. Therefore, the provision of then 5 additional spaces is a betterment, but it still does not comply with the council's parking standards. On balance, though, the parking concerns are considered to be outweighed when taking into account the benefits arising from the proposal, including improvements to the appearance and deterioration of the building, and that the building will remain in community use, that the proposal will actually provide 5 additional parking spaces over and above the existing extant use on the site, and that the proposed church actually requires lesser, albeit 1, provision of parking than the existing lawful doctor's surgery use. In terms of ecology, the council has been advised that the Ecology Department does have no objection to the proposal. The county ecologist has advised that due to a lack of reported evidence of any bats or bat activity within the nocturnal survey report, which was an additional survey they requested, that the proposed works are unlikely to impact on bats. However, they have recommended that what's considered a soft demolition of the building to do with the hand stripping of particularly the roof tiles is undertaken as part of condition 6, just in case there are any bats there. Therefore, the application is considered to accord with policy any1 of the local plan in terms of ecology. As members will see from the report, there have been other matters considered, such as air quality, climate change, sill and equality implications. It is not considered that there are any other concerns raised in these matters. Overall, the application is considered to be acceptable in principle due to the proposed location within the urban area and resulting in the redevelopment of a deteriorating site to facilitate a use that would be a benefit to certain members of the community. The proposal is acceptable in design and appearance and therefore would not have a significant impact to residential communities. The Highway Authority has considered the access to be acceptable and the parking arrangement. There will not be an adverse impact on protected species or biodiversity subject to conditions, and the proposal is not considered to adversely affect air quality and or energy efficiency. Overall, the application is recommended to be approved, subject to conditions and informatives as laid out in the draft decision notice and agenda, and that Chief Officer of Growth and Investment is given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the conditions and informatives as outlined in the draft decision. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, could I ask Councillor Livesey to make her comments as a ward councillor?
So this property's been a blight on both Coton and Boughton wards and Newbold and Brownsover ward for 10 years. The property's been owned by the applicants for at least 6 of those years, and during that time they've sought and obtained planning permission, which they then allowed to lapse, and they allowed the building to fall into such a state of disrepair that Councillor Freeman had to call in building control and planning enforcement to force them to take action to make it safe. So it's disappointing, therefore, that I have to oppose this application. I'm asking Planning Committee to reject it on the grounds that it will have a significant detrimental effect on the residents of Borough and the surrounding residential streets because there is insufficient parking. The owners of the building are relying on the availability of spaces in the car park at the front of the building. This car park is not only used by Christ Church congregation, but also the new doctor's surgery, which is open on Saturdays, the community centre, which is also open on Saturdays, and the shops in Brownsover. I hold my councillor surgeries every month at Brownsover Community Association, and sometimes getting parked there is quite difficult already. The car park was almost full last Saturday at 11 a.m. The plans propose a congregation of up to 105 people. So being generous and assuming 3 people will travel in one car together, that could generate potentially an additional 35 cars. Current provision cannot accommodate that, and the 5 additional spaces that are proposed can't make up that difference. For significant events such as weddings and funerals, we could see much larger numbers of people attending, along with the need to park many more cars. The assumption made by applicants, and it seems agreed with by the planning team, is that nothing happens at Christ Church on Saturdays. Well, this just isn't true, as weddings will also take place at church on Saturdays. The planning document refers to the car parking for the doctor's surgery. This is in effect double counting because the doctor's surgery is open on Saturdays and it is busy. The ample storage for bikes referred to in the documents does not exist. The first floor cafe appears to be open to the main hall, and it's inconceivable that this would not be used as an additional area to accommodate larger congregations than stated in the planning documents. The only solution for churchgoers who cannot be accommodated will be to park on Bow Fell and Helvellyn Way, making life difficult for residents. Should 2 weddings take place on the same day at the same time, one in each church, and a resident of Bow Fell decides to hold a party or a barbecue, the result will be chaos.
Thank you, Councillor Livesey, for your contribution. Can I ask you to leave now, then? Okay.
Thank you. There are 3 parking areas around that part of Brownsover. When you've shown them on the maps. How many spaces are? This might test you. How many spaces are in those 3 car parks?
To be honest, Chair, I don't know. It is the answer to that. I don't know how many spaces are over there overall. I'm aware it is a very well-used car park because, as you said, you've got parking. I thought in 3 distinct areas: one off Hollowell Way, one by the doctor's surgery, and then one off. I think actually you access it off Helvellyn Way. Obviously, this is then proposing it also off Bow Fell as well. But obviously, what that's doing is creating an extra 5 over and above what's there already. But I'm guessing because of where it's located, it would be generally used by churchgoers rather than other people into those shops. At the moment, or it appears to me to be like a free-for-all at the moment, that parking area. So it is on a first-come, first-served basis. But I think the reason I think we're not recommending refusal for this is because the existing building doesn't have any parking and could lawfully open up as another doctor's surgery or medical practitioner place and have put extra pressure onto that car park without having to provide any additional parking. So this, we're feeling, is a betterment because we're actually getting a regeneration of the building, but also those additional 5 spaces.
Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just kind of, I want to first just kind of respond to the point that you've made then just at the end, Mr. Holt, and then make my other point. But I was always taught with planning applications to treat them on their merit, and therefore I don't understand the line of thought whereby one compares this to a hypothetical use that doesn't exist. So there is not currently a proposal to use the site for a doctor's surgery, and given the state of it, it would require substantial work to be possible. So therefore that hypothetical circumstance to me is irrelevant. My comment really, I wanted to query that being really familiar with this site, it's very, very busy with traffic on a constant basis. So can I ask, was there a traffic, a proper genuine traffic study done here? Is the first question. And my second question relates to the cycle storage point, in that it seems slightly kind of lost in the ether here that the design and access statement submitted makes reference to cycle parking, but the plan doesn't. And then there's a condition here which says that it won't come forward until cycle parking is demonstrated. So if you could come back on that point, and then also the first traffic study, please.
Yeah, coming back on those points. I notice you say it's hypothetical, but obviously it's a material consideration what the use of the existing building is and what it could potentially lawfully operate as. Now, I appreciate that what you're saying is because of its dilapidated state, there's a question mark about whether or not that would actually happen. But lawfully, that building could, change or not change, open as a doctor's surgery, having an impact on the parking arrangements there as we stand today. It's not like it, because the building exists, and it's not like it's completely been demolished and not there, then that lawful use still remains. So that's why you're right, every application is assessed on its own merits, that is correct. But obviously, one of the material planning matters we have to consider is that building is there and does have a parking allowance attached to it, even though it has been vacant for 10 years. So that's why I made that point. With regard to the parking assessment, I'm not aware that one has been submitted. The Highway Authority haven't requested that there was a requirement for a further survey work to be done. They, I think, again, are relying probably on the extant use of the site. So I'm not aware that there has been one that has detailed that. And, sorry, apologies, your other point was? Oh, the cycle storage. Yeah, I know there's reference to it, and that's why we've imposed a condition to basically say that we need to ensure that we have cycle parking provision at the site prior to the building first being brought into use.
Regarding the comment Councillor Livesey made regarding the churches having potential events on at the same time, I appreciate this is out of the sphere of normal things within council, but is there anything that could be done as a condition that if there was a wedding at the existing church, that the Adventist church didn't have it at the same time?
I can understand the concerns, because like you're saying, if there's a big event going on, whether it's a wedding or whether it's actually a party, I think, or barbecue, or I think was actually mentioned, that could encourage more people. I think that would be very difficult to actually impose a condition. I think it's a question whether it would be reasonable to actually do that. I mean, obviously, yes, you can impose conditions on the hours of operation of a particular activity. I know in the submitted documents they've talked about a Wednesday and a Saturday, but obviously I believe from what else I've heard tonight is that actually the other church is open on Saturday anyway. So, but I think to try and impose or restrict both uses with regard to whether there's a clash of wedding, I think would be quite a difficult thing to do. Yeah, you could impose the I suppose the hours of operation we've done, or the days of the week something is open. But I think the difficulty in that, I think we'd find that quite challenging to actually implement in practice, because obviously the church itself may, obviously again is a business, and I guess and would also then, want to be open for, I don't know whether it's for other facilities as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First of all, I better declare a non-pecuniary as a church warden of St Dennis Church, Paleton, and a church bell ringer at St Edith's, Monks Kirby for the past 60 years, and counting, hopefully. But a bit of interesting information that I'd like to see is what would be the proposed denomination of the church, because that gives me some idea of the numbers that might be in attendance. And okay. The other question was the fact that were they thinking of bringing in the congregation from the near locality, so there'd be sort of walk in there? Is that the idea of it?
In terms of, I can only base it on the information that's submitted, the information that's public, but my understanding is that the applicants were the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I believe there is a church of the same denomination at Hillmorton Road in Rugby. I'm not aware it's moving to that site. I've not been provided with information to imply that. So as far as I'm aware, it's in addition to that to serve the local community. I'm assuming the church itself, you know, possibly, there's obviously demand from their own perhaps congregation of the area. Obviously that doesn't necessarily mean that people won't necessarily travel by other means. But my knowledge of that is all I know from the application form. I don't know if that means that the congregation is of a significant size or not. It would obviously be based on the building and the number of seats available.
I've got one for you. Given that if they were looking at an overflow event, would they not have a responsibility to talk to our licensing and the police? And it's not necessarily a local planning matter.
Yes, obviously, my knowledge obviously of licensing is separate from planning. I'm assuming there would be potentially other licenses they may have to apply for to the councils, possibly to do with like food or for, you know, serving of alcohol, for example, is one. Whether such religious venues require specific licensing by this council, unfortunately, I don't have that knowledge. I don't know if that would be required. Obviously, Highway Authority hasn't asked for any traffic regulation orders as part of this application. I'm aware that on Hollowell Way, obviously the other side of the site, which is accessed by the car park, there are double yellow lines in that area. There aren't any, as far as I'm aware, on Bowfell or Helvellyn Way, from what I can recall. Whilst I appreciate you don't want to create an issue, the Highway Authority haven't actually requested that. Obviously, if it did become an issue, particularly from a highway safety point of view at junctions, they have their own powers to then insist on that. But they haven't offered that as a reason or a requirement as part of this permission, and as part of their no objection.
Thank you. I almost need to apologise because I'm fascinated by this kind of hypothetical discussion on planning, and if I can't ask that question here, then where can I ask the question? It's just related to, again, hypothetically, there was an applicant come forward for a doctor's surgery on this site. Because of the state of the building, it would necessitate demolition and a rebuild. That seems a reasonable conclusion. In that scenario, would that application require adherence to parking standards or not?
Okay, on that basis, yes. If the application came for demolition and rebuild, then yes, there would then have to be an assessment on parking standards. Obviously, the building, as far as I'm aware, again, I'm not a structural engineer, but hypothetically, you know, if works were done to that building to make it structurally sound, if it was found to be that, or at least habitable again, then obviously that could all be done under permitted development without requiring planning. Obviously, as soon as they want to extend it, even if it, hypothetically, it opened as a doctor's surgery and they wanted to extend it further, then obviously that then would be subject to obviously further parking standards, and that might be when in an issue then where we have this debate about whether or not we would allow that extension.
Yeah. Thank you. I think, to be honest, I think that additional clarification that it's only on whether or not this existing dilapidated building was reused would then not need to be a parking assessment, I think is useful. Thank you.
The officer will move into debates.
Sorry, I was just one final question because it has eluded me in the officer's report. Can I just ask, when the officers were considering the planning merits, are we looking at a low access or high access use? Against policy D2?
That is a good question. I wasn't the case officer. Because it's based on the local plan and what's in the local plan, and basically being a high or low access area. I think in Appendix 5 of the local plan, I think it's primarily around the, it's quite tight, I think, around the urban area, so I'm guessing it's going to be a low access area when the assessment was done. I know in the report it goes into detail.
If you just bear with us, Stephen, we'll just check.
I'm just trying to see if I can. Because my gut instinct is to say it's outside the high access area, so therefore it would have to be based on a low access. Yes, parking standards for the high access area are primarily around the urban area, around the terrace streets of Rugby. They don't go beyond the railway. Obviously this site is much further north, so it should have been assessed on a low access parking arrangement. Okay.
Sorry, Chair. Well, it's kind of coming out from the discussions that everybody's saying.
That's fine.
So the doctor's surgery has a higher requirement of parking spaces than the church, potentially.
Yeah.
All of which would be using the public car park, save for the 5 spaces you've got there. How do they, I'm just curious how they work it out, because I get that the doctor's surgery has a requirement for spaces because there are staff there. Disclosure, I'm a patient of Brownsove Medical Centre. When you go in there, there's the staff and the people there for appointments. So, you know, in the waiting room, maybe 5 people, if that, most of whom are probably local and walk or will park in the public car park. With this, you're going to have potentially 105 people arriving all at the same time, all needing to be there for a specific time, be it service, wedding, or whatever. It's not the ebb and flow that a doctor's surgery would have. So I'm just curious how it gets worked out.
I mean, it will have come originally, I guess, from consulting our development strategy team with our highway authority team, and obviously it forms part of the local plan. I noticed that the standards talk about it being based on, for a doctor's surgery, based on consulting rooms, but on places of worship, such as church halls, it's based on either number of fixed seats or floor space. But it's an interesting point, because I take what you're saying is like, yes, if for a doctor's surgery, you generally can't just drop in. You have to go, you have to go by appointment in most cases. Obviously, with a place of worship, you're right, it would be, normally it would be at a set time, and there would be a higher percentage of people would go at certain times for events or congregations or whatever. I'm guessing there is a science to how this is all worked out, but as I'm not a highway engineer, I'm not quite sure how that's done. All I can base it on is what our standards are and how, you know, we've interpreted and we've calculated that and where we are. But, you know, I accept that is a very valid point.
We can either approve, reject, or defer. Do we have a Councillor Moran?
Thank you. I'll try and save my voice. For me, we've got planning rules and guidelines for a reason, and I think it's by definition special considerations and merit to go against those guidelines. My instinct here is that parking is a material issue. And I think some of the justification appeared to be, and I don't want to paraphrase, but some of the justification seemed to be that it's a derelict building, you know, it's an eyesore, let's get it sorted. But that shouldn't be that state of affairs shouldn't be the facilitator to inappropriate development. And so for me, the fact that it has been derelict for so long and a planning application has lapsed under the existing owner, that removes some of that sort of goodwill that it will come forward now. So for me, I'm keen to propose a refusal on the basis that the parking standards are not met, and I'm at a loss to how cycling has been escaped here.
Other comments? Councillor.
So this all, to me, seems to turn on policy D2 and the parking standards, and I have just spent the last few minutes whilst listening to this desperately trying to do some quick back of the fag packet maths on parking standards, and that's why I asked the question of the officer, what had been the assessment made, because I think we do need to look at everything in context, and the context of the site is very constrained. There isn't really anywhere to put more than half a dozen parking spaces because it's bordered by roads, there's an existing car park, there are other buildings. So I was looking through policy D2, refreshing my memory, trying to find out if there was a use for this building that would comply with the parking standards. And I came up with possibly B2 and B3 and B8, which are all somewhat, sorry, B2, possibly B1, B2 and B8, all of which are inappropriate for their own reasons. So my concern is that we've essentially got this completely derelict building, which is an eyesore, is a magnet for vandalism, and we've inadvertently got ourselves into the position where if we apply D2 completely literally, there isn't actually a use for that building because you can't accommodate the parking within the space. So for that reason, looking at it, considering the benefits of bringing the building back into use, the existence of the derelict eyesore, and the constraints on the sites relative to D2, I am forced to conclude that officers have made the correct balance, and so I will move approval as set out in the officer's report.
Any members seconding either the refusal or the approval?
Yeah, well, yes, I'm in two minds on this one, Chair, because, well, yeah, well, I've only got one brain cell left now, but I can see the good works that churches do. Family getting together, children being taught right from wrong, and we switch on the television on a daily basis and see some horrific things going on, and try and focus on something really positive. And those that's worked in construction, and I know there's one or two of us that, you know, work in construction on a daily basis, a few weeds and a few boarded up windows, you know, that can all be sorted in a matter of a few days. And the whole building is completely transformed, because we haven't seen any photographs actually of the deterioration of the building, nothing inside, you know, to give us some idea of what is required to make it 100% again. But
approval or refusal?
Well, I'll second the approval.
I'm seconding the refusal.
Right.
Can I just
then I'm going.
No, I'd just like to add to the debate, because I genuinely, I've missed these kind of discussions and interactions with Councillor Picker. So, but I wanted to, if you want to kind of put on the record that, for me, the lovely history of this site, surely it was a doctor's surgery. That's when there was the communal parking space before the new surgery was built. And to some extent, the historical record of this site is one where there was a surgery and parking. We now have a new surgery. So again, I'll go back to the point, this kind of slightly false academic parallel with if we built another doctor's surgery, we wouldn't. But in answer to Councillor Picker, if car parking cannot be properly accommodated here, then something like residential, you know, a residential unit with its own parking space or two would be sufficient, particularly for a particular type of use. So there is an alternative use. And I think that needs to be considered, that's all. So for me, again, I repeat that the justification for parking is inappropriate, and the state of the building needs to be considered in that regard.
Make a point on that. We have to determine the application that's in front of us, not what may be, if and or can or maybes. So if you're asking for a refusal, then presumably the ground is D2?
The rationale for refusal is the parking. My point was in contention to Councillor Picker making speculation as to alternative uses that would not be appropriate. I just wanted to counter that, that was all.
I'm going to put this to the vote. Those in favour of the officer's recommendations to approve. Will you do approval before we do?
We have the refusal. We have the refusal first.
Okay. So, right. So, in terms of the officer's recommendation for approval, those in favour? One. Those against? That is clearly lost. And the reasons for refusal is we're talking about D2 as the reason for refusal.
Yeah, I obviously members have voted, but I had the reasons quite clearly put by Councillor Moran, which were to do with that there was inadequate parking standards based on the parking policies that we've got, together with cycle standards as well. So, no, that's fine. I've got it now.
Would somebody like to let Councillor Freeman back in? Sorry. First.
Good evening. This application is for a residential care home on the Holton Sustainable Urban Development, land north of Hanley Road. It's being reported to Planning Committee for determination because it's been called in by Councillor Daly, who has called it on the grounds that the need outweighs proposes. The application site is located within Key Phase 1 area of the Holton development. It sits between St Gabriel's Primary School to the northwest and the David Lloyd Health Club to the southeast. The land was last used as a temporary construction compound to serve the ongoing wider Holton development. Here are some site photographs. On the left, we're looking towards St Gabriel's School and Holton Way. And on the right, we're looking northeast towards an area for future development. And here on the left, we're looking north towards residential houses in Lee Drive. And on the right, we're looking toward the David Lloyd Club. The plot sits in a prominent location within Holton. It fronts onto two primary streets, Holton Way and Hanley Road. The slide shows an aerial view of the site, and the street hierarchy plan here shows figures from the KP1 design guide with the primary streets of the Holton development shown in red. And the application site's located here. The proposed building would be 3 stories at 9.5 metres in height with a central hub. It would be located in the centre of the plot and provide 66 single rooms with ensuite wet rooms, lounges and recreational spaces for residents. Outside there would be secure landscape gardens with railings enclosing the garden area. The parking area would be to the front with an ambulance and drop-off area. A secure bike store will also be provided for residents and visitors to use. The key considerations for this application are the principle of development, evidence of need, and the character and design of the proposed scheme. Holton is an allocated site under policy DS3 of the local plan. It's within the Rugby town urban edge and classified as the most sequentially preferable and sustainable location for development. The principle of development for it is therefore acceptable, subject to the proposed development complying with other development plan policies. Local plan policies seek to provide a wide choice of high-quality homes across the borough for different groups, including those designed to meet the needs of older people. Policies encourage the provision of housing to maximise the independence and choice of housing for older people. However, paragraphs 62 and 63 of the National Planning Policy Framework requires the use of housing need assessments to determine the minimum number of homes needed or establish the type of housing needed for different community groups. When assessing proposals for the development of specialist housing, the local plan has regard to the specialist housing need as identified within the Strategic Housing Market Assessment. However, this assessment was superseded by the Housing and Economic Development Needs Assessment in 2022, which was commissioned jointly by local planning authorities in Coventry and Warwickshire. An independent planning need assessment has been submitted as part of this application. The need identified in the report is significantly higher than the need identified within the Hedner report. The local planning authority has concerns regarding the methodology used for the report, which was produced by Carterwood. The figures and conclusions put forward in that report are based on differing assumptions which are not consistent with the Council's established evidence base. The Council recognises there is a need for the C2 use of a residential care home. However, the level of need presented within the applicant's planning need assessment is not accepted. The Hedner is the accepted and recognised assessment for housing need. Whilst the provision of a residential care home would help to diversify the range of uses and facilities at Halton, it must be equally stressed that the provision of a building for this use needs to meet and maintain the high design standards that Halton exemplifies. The National Planning Policy Framework makes clear that creating high-quality buildings and places is fundamental to what planning and development process should achieve. To support this, the NPPF is strengthened by a growing library of planning practice guidance from the government to support good design practice. The government continues to place increasing emphasis on design quality. Sorry. The Halton Sustainable Extension is a strategic, high-quality development that has benefited from extensive design work to ensure consistent and exemplary standard as the site progresses over many years. Halton is being delivered in a series of 7 key phases, and to date the development has been delivered across key phases 1 to 4. Each phase is supported by a design guide which ensures that the development is well planned, visually attractive and consistent with the strategic vision for Halton. The application site is located within Key Phase 1 and the design guide for this phase was approved by the Council in May 2015. The age of the guide has been questioned by the applicant. However, the passage of time does not diminish its value or relevance, and it remains a material consideration in the determination of applications for Phase 1. The fundamental design principles it sets out remain current, and the use of design guides and codes is fully supported within the NPPF. A recent appeal decision at Halton confirmed the continued importance of the Key Phase 1 design guide. The inspector, in dismissing the appeal, stated, "This deviation from the design guide, which otherwise appears to have been predominantly followed across the development, strengthens my findings that the development is uncharacteristic of the surrounding area. Approving this development would also materially diminish the intended design quality of the SUE between permission and completion." As well as fronting onto 2 primary streets, the KP1 design guide shows that the frontage and character along key routes, and for this parcel is a near continuous formal linear frontage that is specified. The National Design Guide states, paragraph 69, well-designed places have buildings which define street edges and contribute to their legibility, safety and accessibility. It also states that successful streets are characterised by buildings facing the street to provide interest overlooking and active frontages at ground level. The site is also located within the Halton Eastern Gateway character area. Primary parcel frontages in this area are required to display clear enclosure with buildings that line and face the principal routes. How parking is arranged has a fundamental effect on the quality of a place. The KP1 Design Guide requires car parking to have a minimal visual impact. Strategies for parking and amenities support the overall quality of the place. The National Design Guide states that well-designed parking is attractive, well-landscaped and sensitively integrated into the built form so that it does not dominate the development or the street scene. The surface parking arrangement for the care home would dominate the frontage of the building. The building is understandably institutional in scale, however, it is considered that it currently presents as a single horizontal mass with insufficient definition and does not relate well to the context of the site. This slide is showing the front and rear elevations, and it's a duplicate of an earlier application which was refused in May 2025 because of poor design. The applicant has advised that they build a limited portfolio of 3 fixed building typologies, and these designs are not amended or tailored to suit the site's specific characteristics. The Council has actively sought design solutions and tried to negotiate with the applicant for both applications to address the design concerns. One of their standard typologies is an L-shaped building that with some adjustment could be used to overcome the design issues for this plot. However, the applicant has demonstrated a lack of willingness to deviate in any way from their 3 building typologies or to adjust the L-shaped building to achieve a design solution, citing operational viability and staffing level efficiencies as the reasons for this. This is the first application at Halton that has been refused. The Council is not opposed to the principle of development on this site for this use and believes that there is a design solution here that could be utilised to provide the care home. The applicants aren't willing to design and build a care home that responds to the context and site character of the site in this area. Approximately 20% of Halton development has been delivered to date, and not all parcels have come up for sale yet. Another plot may come forward that could work for the applicant and meet the design standards required at Halton. So in summary, the design concerns, the scale and massing of the building and development does not enhance or complement its surroundings or address the environment. It fails to make a positive contribution to placemaking, presenting as a standalone design with no sense of cohesion or integration into its wider surroundings. The design of the car parking arrangement of the site dominates the frontage. It's considered that issues relating to the layout, scale and design of the building remain unresolved. The proposal does not demonstrate the improvements necessary to comply with the Key Phase 1 Design Guide or broader policy expectations for high quality, context-sensitive development. It does not maintain the high design standards that Halton exemplifies. So in the planning balance, paragraph 139 of the National Planning Policy Framework states development that is not well designed should be refused, especially where it fails to reflect local design policies and government guidance on design, taking into account any local design guidance and supplementary planning documents such as design codes and design guides and codes. Benefits are broken down into social, economic and environmental. The development would contribute towards the social objective in meeting an identified need, and this carries moderate weight. Temporary economic benefit during construction by way of job creation and construction spent, there would be potential small contribution to the local services from the staff working at the site. This carries limited weight. From an environmental objective, the proposal will bring about environmental enhancements through the 10% biodiversity net gain that the site will achieve through landscaping. However, this is a mandatory requirement and affords neutral weight. In terms of harms, the development fails to address frontages and is a standalone design with no sense of cohesion or integration, resulting in a proposed scheme which doesn't provide a high quality or well-designed place and would have a detrimental and adverse impact on the character of the area. Significant weight is attributed to this harm. The scheme fails to comply with fundamental and widely accepted design principles, the key Phase 1 Design Guide, the National Design Guide, National Planning Policy Framework and local plan policies, and this carries significant weight. Should the development be permitted, it would materially diminish the intended design quality of the Holton SUE between permission and completion. The recommendation is therefore to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. To make his comments.
Okay, good evening, Chairman, members of the committee. I'm the planning manager for LNT Care Developments, the applicants. And our officers have expressed no objection in principle to the development of a care home on this plot and appear recognising of the planning benefits this development would deliver. Unfortunately, there has been a somewhat negative stance taken to our proposed site layout and design, which I'm hoping to address in the next couple of minutes. Our site layout and building design perfectly reflect the canted shape of the site and form of the plot, reflects the frontage road alignment, delivers the required active frontages, and addresses the strategic road junction. We found it frustrating that such an inflexible design approach has been taken when more flexibility has already been given in relation to other developments opposite. Officers have suggested that it would be easy for us to amend our design to a preferred alternative L. And I would say if it was that easy, we would have done that. We would have done it, but it is not easy. The plot to us is not of a suitable form and depth to accommodate officers' preferred approach, which is neither a suitable nor viable design response. And we think it's somewhat of a red herring to have raised this. Attempts by officers to amend our design have neglected fire and building regulations, which we cannot do, and the resultant care home would effectively be based around a singular, long, straight corridor, not acceptable from a care quality perspective. The tilted balance that's been mentioned does apply, and we are entirely adamant as applicants that the positive benefits of this proposed development far outweigh any perceived adverse design impacts, which we don't agree there are. There are so many positives in favour of supporting this scheme. The care home is intended as a local community care facility for older people, currently absent from the Hulton development, but required by policy H6. The care home is intended as all future residents would come from the local area or have a strong local connection. And of the 50 to 60 jobs created, almost all of these would be offered to local people. It would deliver a perfect architectural response, in our view, to its context and through its layout and building form. The car park frontage impact would be significantly less than in the case of other nearby developments. It would deliver the desired active frontages with its front entrance to Hanley Road and 24/7 occupation. It will deliver an entirely connected and socially inclusive development, community focal point, adjacent to the school, and it will respond positively in an architectural sense to the strategic road junction. L&T aim to deliver the highest standards of design and build and excellent standards of amenity, privacy and dignity within our care homes that future residents from the local area deserve within their twilight years.
Okay. Can I, before I bring in members, can I ask Helen Nightingale to speak as one of my major projects officers, and perhaps along the concerns regarding design standards?
Yeah, so on this application, there is the Holton Design Guide, which is conditioned by the original outline application. This application obviously is a full application, not party to that outline application, but the principles within that are very much steered by that national policy, and the design principles that we are objecting to here aren't subjective small matters. They are fundamental design principles around how the application does relate to its surrounding area. With the layout and as presented, it would look like an isolated building on that plot. You have two strong primary streets as you enter into Holton, and that is in a prominent location. We have tried to talk with the applicants around alternative designs, and we are at an impasse on that point. But here, there is a high in the borough, not just Holton, but in terms of national design, we are trying to uphold those design standards. With good design comes good environment, it reduces antisocial behaviour, and it creates a good sense of place, and that is here what we are promoting.
Councillor Lawrence, you indicate.
Just on a point of clarification from the Speaker. The Speaker has made a conversation about a nearby development that hasn't met these standards. Could you just please clarify that?
Through you, Chair. Yes, so there is the David Lloyd Club opposite the site that we wanted them to build to front the edges, but it has a utilities buried under the frontage and couldn't be built over. So therefore, that some flexibility was allowed for that. And the other site that's been used is the Vego site for employment, which was a very awkwardly shaped site for what was needed to go on it. And it was felt that as they're both non-residential uses, the designs that came forward were appropriate and were allowed.
Councillor Moran?
Thank you, Chair. Just two quick questions. One was to clarify, the applicant mentioned about future occupants of the site being local. Is that a condition? Is that a legal enforceable condition? And the second point was to clarify that I think there was reference to this application having been previously submitted and rejected by this committee. Is that correct? And if it is correct, can I clarify what, if anything, is different in this application to the previous application? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. In terms of the previous application, it wasn't determined at committee. It was a delegated decision and it was refused. And there are no differences at all. The application's been resubmitted as it was in May. And the first point was, sorry, could you repeat that?
Local residency.
Oh, the local residency, thank you. So we can't condition that, and there's no guarantee that the employment and that the employees will come from the area. And as I say, it wouldn't be reasonable for us to condition something like that. I mean, Holton's, as we said, it's about 20% built out at the moment. So the likelihood is that they would need some staff from further afield, I should think.
Please, could I clarify something the Speaker said about fire regulations in terms of the changes that you were requesting and the suggestion that the fire regulations wouldn't be met in those circumstances?
Through you, Chair. Yes, so in the negotiations when we were supporting their L-shaped template, we tried to put forward some changes to an internal arrangement or changing the length of the arms of the building slightly so that it would fit on the plot. As the Speaker said, that could possibly have created some issues with fire regulations, but they are under a separate regime to planning. I think the key point here is that we have tried to work and to negotiate, and there's been no flexibility at all to what's being presented in terms of the design.
Thank you, Chair. In Speaker's speech, he mentioned about the Care Quality Commission will not approve of the design which the council is giving. Can you please explain more about it?
Through you, Chair. So the Care Quality Commission is obviously a board that sits outside of planning and oversees the provision of this type of use and provision for care for the elderly. We were trying to negotiate with them in terms of what we could achieve planning-wise. We're not experts in terms of Care Quality Commission. As I said, the main reason cited for not wanting to change anything was the operational viability and staffing efficiencies, and that was set out in their design response document that they submitted to us. And I think, again, the point being that there was a refusal to try and address the concerns in any way. We were presented with 3 building typologies. The one that they've put forward is the one that fits best in this plot, and there was no flexibility to change anything.
Thank you, Chair. Would it be possible to see that front elevation slide again? That's okay. The planting scheme doesn't seem very sort of intensive, does it really? I was thinking if there was more trees planted, would that help with the car parking issue?
Through you, Chair. Yeah. So sometimes, yes, we ask for more landscaping to soften a car park and the visual effect of it. But in this particular case, if we go to this slide, you can see the extent of the car parking. It is substantial, and it's filling, over a quarter of the site. And it will dominate very much. I mean, it's essentially the access point to the care home is predetermined. It's already been constructed. And so a lot of the design has been based around that for the car parking. It would be possible to move it, say here, have the building more, building design down this end, and then we could get the car parking pushed away. There are alternatives. But I think increasing the landscaping, yes, it would help, but, we're talking about a big area here.
I was just thinking more along the sort of pathway, really, to try and hide the parking. There doesn't seem to be many sort of large trees, really. That was all I was...
Well, landscaping is something that could be conditioned as part of any application to come in post-decision.
Thanks, Chair. Coming back to the point of staff efficiency, the way of working inside the building, if the building is in one long stretch, as what council is requesting at the moment, I do find it would be very less efficient for the staff to work around because, for example, if a corner room patient rings a bell, for a staff to reach there would be longer if the building has more access nearing to the patient's room, then the staff can reach quicker. So is it something being considered?
It's not just about that, though. It's about the numbers of staff that would be required and the operational viability of the building in accordance with that. I believe that as an organisation, they've worked out 3 very rigid typologies that enable delivery of a optimally viable and efficient, not just for staff, but in other ways as well.
Can I remind members that we can't redesign this in committee. It is the application that we have in front of us and whether you're happy with that or not.
Can I just ask, the report makes reference to no third-party comments being received. Can I ask if there was any discussion with the master developer on the design and location of the site?
So the master developer would have dealt initially with the applicant, the developer, in terms of the plot they allocated. They have been made aware of the decision by the authority to refuse the application. But other than that, they've not had direct involvement with us in terms of design.
This is just a sort of the way the meeting progresses. We're starting to verge into more discussions and debate, and we still have a speaker. So I just, given that it's a ward councillor and normally they leave after...
Thank you, Chair. I'm here this evening as one of Holton's local councillors to speak in support of the proposed care home at Holton and to ask planning committee members to make the decision on this major application for the Borough of Rugby. I welcome the officer's conclusion that the principle of a care home in this location is accepted. Holton is a growing and thriving community with a wide demographic. As that community grows, so too will the number of older residents who need care and support. Ensuring that those needs can be met within the community, close to family, neighbours and familiar places is incredibly important. The site location chosen seems to be a sensible one, on the edge of the Holton development, close to St Gabriel's School and new employment and leisure facilities. It is therefore well suited to a care-based residential use. It keeps those who require care connected to everyday life and services, rather than placing them on the edge of town. I also recognise, as the officer's report rightly sets out, that high-quality design has been a defining characteristic of Holton since day one. Any development in Holton should reflect that ambition. In this case, the care home appears to have been designed to respond to Key Phase 1 design guide. It provides a purpose-built and distinctive building that marks a key gateway into Holton from Crick Road, provides landscape gardens and a design that maintains a continuous building line along Handley Way. The layout has also clearly been shaped by its surroundings. The David Lloyd Leisure Centre and its giant bubble tennis dome, which weren't shown in the photographs on the presentation, and nearby commercial buildings are set back from the street. The care home follows that established pattern. I'm aware that officers have raised concerns about the level of direct visual interaction with the street. However, in the context of a care home, residents need both privacy and security. The design ensures that the main entrance and visitor parking are visible and well used along Handley Way. I do want to acknowledge the main concerns raised by residents locally, and that is actually parking. People have understandably questioned whether there will be enough parking for staff visitors and service vehicles, particularly at peak times. Residents want reassurance that parking will be properly managed on site and that it will not unintentionally push cars into surrounding streets. These are genuine concerns and ones that I believe can be fully addressed through conditions as laid out in the report. We've also seen through experience at the David Lloyd Gym how sensitive parking arrangements can be in this part of Holton. It could be argued that the strict interpretation of the design guide at the David Lloyd Gym has meant members tend to park on the road at the front where the entrance is, rather than using the large rear car park. This has reinforced the view locally that parking needs to be both convenient and clearly designed if it is to function as intended. People simply want to feel confident that lessons learned from other nearby developments are being applied here. I appreciate that any development prompts questions, especially one serving vulnerable residents. But in this case, we have a proposal that meets a growing local need, is located in a sensible place for a care-based community facility, and has been designed to respect its setting and the high design expectations that make Holton special. I believe the scheme is a positive and suitable addition to Holton. These are the reasons that I believe this application should be considered at Planning Committee to ensure the advantages of developing the care home are carefully considered against the interpretation of the design guide in the officer's report.
This open for debate. Councillor Moran.
Thank you. I'll try and be quite brief. Bad development is bad development, fundamentally. We've got a design guide for a reason. We've got officers taking independent assessments for a reason, and we've got an applicant not showing any flexibility or goodwill to engage. And so, from my perspective, if we approve this against the design guide, throw the design guide out the window, why bother even having it? All that work goes to waste. We should be confident enough as an authority to say no if we don't believe it meets the standards we adhere to. Therefore, that seems to follow a logic to me. I think the other point is that in this instance that we've got an applicant who's refusing to be flexible. Well, there are all sorts of examples across the country where huge international corporations, like Nokia, there are examples across the country of where big corporations, international corporations, show flexibility to meet local considerations. If we say yes to this, then it's a complete open door. So for me, it's a recommendation based on what's put forward.
So I'm taking you're supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you. We have another speaker?
Twice in one evening I'm going to speak after Councillor Moran and not entirely agree with his conclusions. Anyone would think we were setting a pattern. So I think can we just go back to the slide that has the wider site layout? Because I think that's the crux of this for me. Sorry, in context of the sort of wider Halton area. Because I think if you look at it as a satellite image, which we don't have, I think it was, there we go. So it is that site, and the overall design style to me actually does sort of mirror the David Lloyd, which we've already had quite an extensive discussion on as to how that ended up the way it was. To me, I think if you take where it is positioned relative to other items, it's not directly in a residential area, it's sandwiched between a school and a gym. So I think actually it being slightly set back from there, all the points that Councillor Daly made with regard to the issues that have arisen around David Lloyd, I do think, and taking on board the need and the tilted balance, I am actually minded to support approval on this occasion. Sorry, I am formally moving that. And then delegating conditions such forth to officers.
Thank you. When I saw the picture of the outside of the building, I was like, okay, that looks just like the Carla Homes development just up the road in Halton. It's the same thing, dark windows, black sort of wood between the windows of the ground floor and the first floor, some white render. You know when it just won't go on. You're obviously very popular, Chair. So in that sense, it does meet the design code because it looks like a building where there are other buildings within Halton that have that. You can see on the plan there that at the start of Halton Way, so as you come up from the roundabout towards the site and you turn left into Halton Way, and there are some houses there that are built right up against the road. Those, and you also see there are cars parked along there. Cars park along there because they don't want to park round the back. You have, within that site, as you're driving in, David Lloyd back from the road with parking at the front of the building and that white tent thing. And as you go into Halton Way, the primary school is also set back from the road. As you go further down Halton Way, where you have houses up against the road, you have cars parked on the road. It's we've got estates all round Rugby where that has happened. Coton Park is a classic. You've got parking round the back. Everybody, exactly. So to kind of put something else in where people think, oh, I need to park on the road because I don't know where the parking is. Now, the design of that building, you've got the front entrance, which I presume is going to be the main entrance in and out for everybody. So any ambulances that turn up, and, unfortunately they do with care homes, they're going to be parked out the front. You need disabled spaces parked out the front. So you're going to have some car park spaces out the front anyway. And I just think if it's right up against the road, it's actually going to look odd compared to the landscape that you've got around it. It's almost going to be over-imposing to have a 3-storey building right up against that road. I drive down there most days. I also, in the report, the officer also, I can't find it, otherwise we'll refer back to it, but I remember reading about, because it's on the edge of Rugby, staff have to drive because they're not going to be able to get there by public transport. Actually, Halton's pretty well served with public transport. There's a bus that goes through Halton and goes down Halton Way, and you've got all the buses that go along the Crick Road. And they're pretty frequent, and I've used them, so I know they exist and I know they're frequent. So that argument doesn't really work. I get there's a design code and I think it should be applied, but I think if we're going to be, we talk about them not being flexible. I think this is a case where actually we're not being flexible either. I think we're looking at it and going, well, the design code says this, but I think if you look at the surroundings and you look at that part of Holton, it would look worse if it was right up against the road than what's being suggested on that map. So I'm going to go along with Councillor Picker, and is it approval of refusal or refusal of... Yeah, I'm not going to refuse. Which way round am I going to do it? I've moved approval of the delegation of officers to the resolved conditions, which I think is technically correct. That, I'm seconding that. Thank you, Chair.
Get the officers just to come back on the points that you've raised.
Just on the points that you made around the surrounding area of David Lloyd, we've explained obviously the variance there due to utilities and site constraints there. It wasn't ideal, but it is what it is. It doesn't mean that you just then accept poor development elsewhere just because something's slightly different on the other side of the road. By allowing the site, the application as is, you got quite an... You go through that prime street there, you'd have quite an open vista. There's no kind of sense of enclosure. It just doesn't respond well to the surrounding area. And I think that's where I said the fun, you know, you're looking at it, and, you know, design is subjective, but as we said, these are fundamental design principles that are kind of around built form that, you know, are in that national guidance and local policy. Did you want to come in, Ruth?
Looking at this site, it looks like a dogleg. It's on a bend. It looks like a dogleg. It's on a bend. If I was going to design a building, I'd design a building that fitted the space. At the moment, I can't see an L shape fitting that space. It would be a dogleg design that would fit that space. Then I look at the Lloyd building across the road when there's a car park. It's only matching what's across the road from it. So, okay, it doesn't meet the design code, but it seems to be correct for the site. So, whilst I wouldn't approve this probably for any other site than this, it seems to be the right thing for this particular site. So, I would want to approve as well, but with the condition that, as been discussed, I think there could be more trees put up, there could be more screening. So I think I would like to soften it, and soften it by putting trees up, etc., which would compensate for the massing that this building would have. So I would go for approval with the additional condition about screening, which I would leave the officers to word.
Yeah, thank you. I sort of welcome the discussion. I think we need to be very mindful of setting precedents here for the rest of the site. I think there's a statistics put forward that 20% of the site has been built out. If we're going to go coach and horses through a design guide at this stage, then that then goes out the window for the rest of the site. So that sets for me a very dangerous precedent. Also, for me, in terms of really simple fundamentals, if an application has been refused by application, and then it's simply resubmitted without variation, without discussion, without negotiation, I think that also sets a very bad precedent for what Rugby Borough Council should stand for, about the engagement that we need as a council to aspire to better standards. So I think it is about this. This is a unique site, and not in any doubt. But I think we've got to be cognizant of what's being set then for the future development of Holton.
Thank you, Chair. What's before us is an application that's already been refused by officers under delegated authority with no changes. Now, the design code is something for applicants to adhere to. The applicant's standard designs are not something for Rugby Borough Council to adhere to. And I'm quite happy to second refusal on this application.
Thank you. If I could just come back to Councillor Simpson-Vince. You made a comment that my report stated about there not being public transport. It doesn't say that. It's not in there. In terms of the parking, they've over-provided at the site, but there have been concerns about parking on the road and overspill and Highways have come back and asked for an obligation so that they can monitor the parking should there be overspill, because it is very busy with St Gabriel's School, and that would be placed on any Section 106 agreement and taken up if monitoring showed there was a problem. I'd also like just to point out that this area here is earmarked for residential development. This area was originally earmarked for residential development. And whilst I take on board all the arguments about, well, the David Lloyd Club doesn't follow its setback, it strengthens the argument for adhering to the design guide for this plot, not to further dilute down the design excellence that's Holton by going against it. Thank you.
I understand the arguments being put forward about the design. I'm also trying to weigh up the fact that there's a need for older people to have a place where they can be visited by their family members. There currently is no care home in Holton, and when Holton was built, provision was made for mixed residential housing. Whilst these are residents of a different kind, they're still residents of the community, and so I think we should be considering that as well. I know Councillor earlier, the speaker did mention that, but for the residents of Holton as well, it would be much easier for them to visit loved ones in that home rather than having to go across Rugby. So I also appreciate what my colleague here has said regarding a condition being trees, to make an increase of biodiversity on the site. So with those conditions in mind, I'd like to support the approval of this.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'd just like to cite the design of the flats built on Clifton Road. Very, very similar. Almost identical. Almost, well, as by the railway.
With respect, Councillor Gillies, we can only look at the application that's in front of us, not what somebody else has done.
But of course, we're looking at design codes, aren't we? And the flats at Clifton Road were built by the council. That's the design they had. So if it fitted in there, why wouldn't it fit out in this street scene? Because what we're not seeing, and on my very first occasion as a councillor sitting on the planning committee, I wanted to see any proposed new development in a street scene, where you got houses either side and how it sat in that street scene. So that would be very, very useful to give it all an idea of just how it looks sitting on that plot. So that's just a few comments for folks to bear in mind. I was going to declare a bit of a non-pecuniary because, you know, I'm much closer for the need of a care home than most folks in the room. But so.
I think it was mostly just to clarify that I'm perfectly happy to take on board the comments from Councillor Lawrence with regards to the additional planting, if that can be imposed through a stronger condition, should committee be minded to approve. And again, I'll leave that to officers to...
Members are putting forward and whether they're feasible for the officer to consider within the application.
So a condition can be imposed to provide a full landscaping scheme prior to commencement of the development that could detail tree planting and all of the other planting around the building. Yes.
Sorry, I'm dredging back through my memory, and this might be a question for Helen. My recollection is that on Holton we did require there to be mature trees as part of the planting process. Can I ask if that would apply to this scheme as well? Because I think that might alleviate some of the comments with regard to design.
I'm going to be honest, I cannot remember. And it's a bit out of the detail for me, if I'm honest. You know, again, it's something we could look through for condition.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points that have been mentioned. One was about obviously additional landscaping. That was obviously to screen the site. But I think it's important to note that good design really should be able to stand on its own right without having additional landscaping put in front of it. I think that is the concern of officers, is that we're in a situation where we don't think this meets our design standards for this part of Holton. And there is concern that, you know, by putting in extra planting because we think that's what's needed to help master development, shouldn't be a scenario we're in considering the development itself should stand in its own right. Another concern that's been mentioned is about the parking arrangements and parking to the front and ambulances. And I am conscious, although I appreciate this is not in Holton, and I'm conscious that Councillor Gillies obviously got hauled up for talking about other schemes elsewhere. But just to remind members, we obviously have approved of the care homes in the town. The one I can think of particularly is the one opposite Sainsbury's. People may be familiar with the Anya Court one. That has parking to the front, but a small amount, and then most of the parking is down the side. And obviously that then in itself, you know, is an arrangement that does work. And I don't believe that has then resulted to lots of cars having to park on Dunchurch Road, which is a main artery into the town. I think if that was occurring, we would certainly know about it.
You've happened to mention a care home that happens to be in my ward, and that has mature trees in front of it. So I think mature trees makes any environment more attractive, whatever is behind it. Besides, there's an argument of biodiversity, and how many large trees are there in the Holton area at the moment? It would be nice. They're growing. And, you know, there is a thing about could we put extra heavy ones in or a few things like that. We could put that consideration back to the applicant. All trees are good. I think there's not, let's not talk about them being masked. Purely for diversity reasons, it would be good to have them.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to, if you want, kind of try and be specific and get expert opinion on the implications for going against the design guide for future plots in Holton, and whether or not, you know, it's correct that if we do disregard the design guide and endorse an applicant's approach of not engaging with the council, we're therefore setting a precedent for the rest of the Holton site. That's my first comment. And I think the second point is just that almost the very fact that we are talking about a landscaping as a necessity does, to me, enshrine the idea that the design fundamentally is inappropriate. And then the last question, please, is to clarify that if we were to refuse this in line with recommendation, there are other plots and sites within Holton that could come forward for a care home, which could be in line with advice. Thanks.
So, yeah, if we don't conform to the design guide, it does raise the question of why have we got it. The government has put strong emphasis on high quality design for the last 10 years at least. More developments are coming forward now with design codes and design guides. There's one for Southwest Rugby. Because the development is built out over a 20+ year period, the existence of these means that the consistency of high quality design is maintained. We don't get 1,000 houses in and then everything starts to fall away. Holton's won awards for its design, for its open space, it's exemplary. And if we start to deviate from the design guide and allow development against it, it will strengthen arguments for other people coming forward. Say, well, you let them do it there. As I said, there are genuine reasons why the David Lloyd Club and the Wago site were allowed to build back and not to the front. They're not residential uses, this is. And it strengthens the argument for adhering to the design guide, where I pointed out where there would be more housing. You know, that will have to conform to the design guide when it comes forward. The second point, please. Yes, that's very possible. As we said, you know, not all plots have gone up for sale yet. There could well be another plot that would work well for this company and for the topologies they have.
Thank you, Chair. I believe we are about to approve or refuse this particular planning application, and there being a possible other site is not within the remit of the decision we make tonight. Also, I believe every planning decision is separate, so the decisions we make tonight won't make any precedent on any future decisions we make. So I think we're making arguments that aren't strictly about the decision we make tonight, and if that could be confirmed. Refer that to the officers, please, Chair.
I just want one point of clarification on what Ruth was, the officer was saying earlier around the precedent and the design guide. Just to be clear, that the design guide as part of Holton is conditioned through the original outline application. This is a full application, which is not part of that so much. So it is a consideration, but as we've stated before, you know, the design principles that we're expressing here are nationally kind of adhered to. So that, just a point of clarification on that. And, you know, we don't want to water down any kind of design on this site. So I just wanted that point of clarification. And I do apologise, Councillor Lawrence, what was the point that you wanted officers to respond to?
One, that this decision tonight doesn't make any difference to any decisions we make forward. Okay? No, we're not saying that the decision today influences a future decision. Every planning decision, as far as I understand, is independent of any previous decision. But there's nobody here, I believe, who's not saying the design guideline should be diluted in any way. We're talking about the planning decision for this particular site tonight.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yes, you're correct that every decision is based separately in terms of the material planning considerations that may then also be associated with it. However, obviously what is quite unique with Holton, and obviously there's work being done with Rugby South West as well, is actually to produce a specific design guide for those areas. And that can help then, and the MPPF is very, very clear on this, that we actually should use more of them to help raise the bar in terms of design. So I think what the concern is that officers have got is that if we start to dilute, in our opinion, the schemes going forward that don't adhere, in our view, to the design guide, it'll make it more difficult for us when we're negotiating with future developers on other schemes, because the first thing they'll do, and it's already, you know, is their mention, so, well, obviously you made an exception there, you were prepared to make exceptions for this site, can we then, you know, because of this guide that has been approved, then it starts to erode those negotiations and those discussions that we had. So I think that's our concern as officers. Obviously, you know, we would, you know, stick to our guns, you know, when we are negotiating, and so we have got this document, but it makes our, I suppose, our life and all committee life a lot easier if, you know, we've upheld high standards, that high bar throughout all schemes that we have where these design guides are in place.
Area.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a clarification for Councillor Edwards regarding the business of care. It don't localize anything. For example, there is no promise that a person from Holton would get a place in the same care home. It depends on the county. So, for example, people from Nuneaton can come and stay in the place where there is in Holton. So the care business doesn't localize anymore. The second thing I want to ask is, if we are doing voting, I would ask for a recorded voting.
So what you're asking for, Councillor, is a recorded vote on the application. Okay. Are there any other comments on that? Okay. Now we'll move to the votes. The officer's recommendation is to refuse. Those in favour of refusal, please show.
Oh, are we not doing the recorded vote? Sorry. I was going to say, is anyone else?
Oh yes, we're doing a recorded.
We do need 3 councillors.
For and against.
If any other 2. Is anyone else seconding and thirding the recorded votes?
Start with Councillor Freeman and work your way round.
No, for a recorded vote we need 3 councillors. And we've only got 2
Is there a
presently,
second
so is there
councillor
anyone
supports?
else?
Yeah, there is a second councillor.
Apologies, I'm just getting the list up to date.
For the recommendation. Could you just say your name as you go? Councillor Freeman.
Freeman, 4.
Councillor Edwards. Against the officer's recommendation. Staffshire. For the officer's recommendation. Against. Councillor Gillies.
Against the officer's recommendation.
Against. For the officer's recommendation.
For the officer's recommendation.
In line with good governance, are we voting for the recommendation?
I'm very sorry. Can we do this again and I read your names out, please? I've managed to get myself into a bit of a pickle. Just to make sure, can we vote again? Apologies. And now can I read your names out so I'm sure that I've got everyone's votes and I've got everyone down? Okay. Oh, sorry. Can I read it out so I know who's voted and who? Apologies. Councillor Edwards. Against. Councillor Freeman. Councillor, apologies, this is an odd order. Councillor Moran. 4. And Councillor Caridia. Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Simpson-Vince. Councillor Russell. Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Thomas. Councillor Gillies. Councillor Picker. Have I missed anyone? Councillor Shrivastava. 4. By my count, that's 7 votes against the recommendation and 5 votes for.
Is approved. Condition, you're talking about mature planting at the front of the building. Well, do we need a form, or can we make it a informative?
No. I mean, through you, Chair, there's obviously the conditions that were asked for you to put on, or you want officers to put sort of standard conditions on as part of the debate. Landscaping would be one of those conditions, and obviously as part of that, we will discuss that with our landscaping officer when those conditions come in to be approved. And obviously, as you mentioned, you know, they can include like heavy standard type trees. There's different terminology which I can't remember off the top of my head, but obviously it's very clear, it's recorded what the committee would like in terms of landscaping and the type and type of trees, so officers are aware of that and can take that away. I don't think it needs an extra condition to do that because it will be covered by a standard landscaping condition anyway.
No.
Can I just actually thank the officers for the report and the work you put into it? We've actually gone against your opinion, but can I really just thank you for your work that you put into it?
Well, no, it was just a comment about the... No, I appreciate that. It was about the condition on the... It appeared that, unless I'm mistaken, the discussion was that there was a particular condition about mature trees on landscaping. That's not a standard element, so does that need to be recorded separately? That was my only comment.
I think Richard explained it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously of those, we can have regard to that with regards to those conditions that we would then impose. We've obviously got a recording from members, so no, I take the point that it's actually an explicit in the actual wording of those conditions, so no, I take that point.
Right. We can move to the next item. R24 0978. So many of you will recognise Sam. Yeah, if you want a quick comfort break, go. go back. Yes. Last item, in terms of applications, R240978. Retrospective application to use the site as a second duty number Gypsy Traveller pitches.
Good evening. This is application R240978, located at plot 19, Top Park, Top Road, Barnacle. The scheme is a retrospective planning application for the use of the site as 2 number Gypsy and Traveller pitches, including the retention of 2 mobile homes, the siting of 2 touring caravans, 2 sheds, 1 outbuilding used as a sensory room, kennels, fencing and gates around the boundary of the site, vehicular access via the access track, and pedestrian access off the Top Park access road, along with surfacing of gravel across the site. So this application has been reported to the Planning Committee for determination under paragraph 5.23b of the Council's scheme of delegation, owing to the fact that the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment considered that the application should be determined by the local authority on such basis. So in terms of the site location and characteristics, access to plot 19 is via the access road on the western side of the overall site, located directly to the west of plot 19. The plot is currently enclosed on the sides by timber fencing, with the east, south and west boundaries of the plot reaching approximately 1.5 metres in height. The northern boundary of the plot extends all the way to the line of hedgerows which borders the Top Road Highway, with the fence here reaching approximately 2 metres in height. There are 2 mobile homes in the plot. The larger of the 2 is located such that its rear elevation flanks the southern boundary fence of the site. Opposite this mobile home and flanking the northern boundary of the site is a further mobile home. To the right of the mobile home on the southern boundary is a grass area which is used as amenity space. There is an outbuilding on the eastern boundary with a floor area of circa 27 square metres. As well as this, there are also 2 shed buildings and a kennel on the northern side of the site. As mentioned previously, the majority of the plot is surfaced with gravel. So this slide shows the aerial view of the wider Top Park site, with plot 19 highlighted with the red outline. This plot is on the northern edge of the site, adjacent to the Top Road Highway. So in terms of the site photos, the top left photo shows the existing arrangement within the plot. One of the sheds can be seen next to the rear of one of the mobile homes on the left. The photo on the right shows the western access road running to the Top Road Highway. So regarding the proposal plans, the top left photo shows the arrangement within the site, which comprises of 2 static mobile homes, 2 sheds, a kennel and a sensory outbuilding on the eastern boundary, with a grass amenity area surrounding this. The remainder of the drawings illustrate the nature of the mobile homes and the outbuildings within the plot. So regarding the consultation responses, all technical consultees provided a stance of no objection. The Parish Council offered an objection along with several neighbouring objections from local residents. The nature of these objections are summarised below and explored in more detail within the officer report. However, these are that the scheme is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, detrimental to the appearance of the area. The application fails to demonstrate or provide any evidence of any very special circumstances which could justify the development on the site in the Greenbelt. The development is not sustainable. The development will be clearly visible from the Coventry Way public footpath. The impact of light pollution that the development will have on the area is significant. There is inadequate drainage on this site. There is a significant number of other Gypsy and Traveller sites in the immediate area and across the wider parish, which has resulted in a significant overconcentration of sites. And finally, the works on this site were undertaken with the full knowledge that there was a High Court injunction on this land, which was intended to prevent any such development. So regarding the principle of development, Local Plan Policy GP1 sets out the presumption in favour of sustainable development. The local plan is now more than 5 years old, and therefore paragraph 11D, the tilted balance of the MPPF, is therefore relevant. Local Plan Policy GP2, the site is outside of any settlement boundary and upon designated Greenbelt land. As per paragraph 153 of the MPPF, this states that when considering any planning application, local planning authorities should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the Greenbelt, including harm to its openness. The proposal does not comply with any of the exception criteria of paragraph 154 of the MPPF, and paragraph 155 is therefore relevant. Turning to paragraph 155, this states that development of homes and other development in the Greenbelt should not be regarded as inappropriate where the listed criteria applies. As explored in detail in the committee report for members, the scheme is not compliant with all the criteria of paragraph 155 and constitutes inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. As per paragraph 153, inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the greenbelt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. Very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. So turning to the level of harm caused to the greenbelt from this scheme, Policy GP2's approach to greenbelt development aligns itself with government guidance. The application site is located within an open landscape situated to the north of Coventry. This area of the Warwickshire Greenbelt plays an important purpose in preventing Coventry merging with settlements to the north. Until June 2028, however, Plot 19 would not be viewed in isolation, but would rather be set against the remainder of the Top Park site, as the eastern linear formation of pitches and 5 pitches to the south of Plot 19 are consented until June 2028. Therefore, views of the plot on its own accord from the east are limited, as they are screened by the eastern side of the Top Park site during this period. Likewise, from the west, the plot will be set against the wider site. However, extending the Top Park site above that already consented would cumulatively erode the openness in the greenbelt and would detract from the rural character and appearance of the area. Therefore, the proposal would constitute an encroachment into the countryside, diminishing the sense of separation between Coventry to the south and other settlements to the north. However, it is important to note the specific characteristics of Plot 19 compared to the majority of the other plots across the wider Top Park site. This plot is the most northern of those on the western side of the site, which does provide a greater prominence to this plot when viewed immediately from the Top Road Highway. However, it is partially screened by the existing hedgerow at the site frontage. Whilst Plot 19 does provide a visual prominence from the highway, its impact on the greenbelt from wider viewpoints, particularly when viewed from the south, east and west over intervening fields, is less than the other plots located to the south. This is because Plot 19, owing to its location, is tucked against the roadside hedge, whilst the majority of the other plots surrounding are more prominent in their location further south within the field. However, whilst it is acknowledged that Plot 19's impact on the greenbelt may be less than the other consented plots within the overall Top Park site, the development proposed would still detract from the character and appearance of the area and impact on the openness of the greenbelt. So with regards to the local needs, the lack of gypsy and traveller accommodation provision across the borough is a key consideration in the determination of this application. The council cannot demonstrate its locally set target for gypsy and traveller provision across the borough. The Rugby GTAA 2025 provides the latest available evidence to identify the accommodation needs of gypsies and travellers across the borough. The latest assessment concluded that there is a minimum requirement of 94 additional gypsy and traveller pitches across Rugby Borough over a period from 2024 to 2042. Of this need, 35 are required in the first 5 years until 2029. Recent decisions have subsequently reduced the council's shortfall of pitch provision during the first period to 24. The GTAA 2025 demonstrates the shortfall of provision across the borough. The council is working towards the adoption of a new local plan which seeks to address this need. This emerging document is at its early stage and the relevant policies only carry limited weight in decision making. Therefore, significant weight is attributed to the contribution this proposal would make to addressing a recognised need for more private gypsy and traveller sites at a local level at this current time. So turning to the personal circumstances that have been demonstrated by the occupants of the plot, evidence of personal circumstances of the current applicants have been received and considered by the LPA. Living on Plot 19 is the applicant and their spouse. The applicant's child and their family also reside within the plot. There are 4 children on site, 2 of which are below the age of 10. 3 of the children are in education within the local area. One of the children on site attends a local educational establishment in the area related to their specific special educational needs. This child has complex medical needs. Evidence of this child's place at the relevant school have been provided to the LPA. As well as this, there are 2 adult occupiers of the site who also have medical needs. In support of these claims, the LPA have been provided with letters from educational establishments within the area attended by the children and evidence of the medical needs of some of the adults on the plot. This evidence is deemed sufficient to support the applicant's assertions that there are both children and adults living on the plot who need to remain in the locality in order to ensure consistent access to education and medical provisions to meet their individual needs. The applicant and his family identify as Romany gypsies, and in line with the above, the applicant has provided sufficient evidence to establish that they would qualify as having gypsy and traveller status for the purposes of assessing planning applications. Turning to matters relating to intentional unauthorised developments, a written ministerial statement in August 2015 establishes that intentional unauthorised development is a material consideration to be weighed in the determination of planning applications. An area with a lawful agricultural use in the Greenbelt has seen operational development and a change of use take place. The previous appeal decision for the plot concluded that the proposal on this site is intentional unauthorised development. Government's planning policy statement of 2015 states that intentional unauthorised development is a material consideration and should be applied to all applications received after the 31st of August 2015. So regarding the visual impact of the proposal scheme, further intensification of the site will be controlled through conditions 8 and 9 in the draft decision notice, preventing the introduction of any more structures or mobile homes than those which are presently on the plot. Condition 11 will prevent the installation of excessive or inappropriate additional external light sources. Whilst it is accepted that the proposal will provide an identified harm on the landscape, owing to the cumulative development within the wider Top Park site, the appropriate conditions applied in this aspect, and owing to the temporary permission which is proposed, the harm is controlled. The use of appropriate conditions in order to overcome objections or conflicts also conforms with the intentions of paragraph 28 of the Planning Policy for Traveller Sites 2024. Regarding residential amenity, objections have been received over the cumulative impact of the level of gypsy and traveller accommodation in the locality on local services and facilities. The proposal has sufficient privacy and space to meet adequate living arrangements of the applicants without compromising the amenities of those living on adjacent plots within Top Park. The nearest settled residential properties to the Top Park site are around 250 metres away. Environmental Health have stated that a noise assessment is not required for the proposal. Conditions 3, 4, 5, 8, 9 and 11 in the draft decision notice will help to restrict amenity implications in the area. Regarding highway safety, County Highways raised no objections subject to condition 7 in terms of the impact on the road network resulting from the proposal. The previous appeal decision for the plot stated that whilst plot 19 was to be served by the Western Access Road, this access road was not included within the red line boundary of the application submission at the time. Therefore, there was not an appropriate access from the plot all the way to the public highway, and in doing so would mean using land where the required consultation hadn't been carried out prior to the determination process. However, in this current application submission before you tonight, the site location plan provided shows the Western Access Road as part of the applicant's red line boundary, and this extends all the way from the plot to the Top Road Highway. This has therefore alleviated the issue relating to access as noted in the previous appeal decision. In conclusion, this scheme complies with local plan policies D1 and D2 of the local plan, and the scheme is also in compliance with paragraph 115 of the NPPF. Regarding biodiversity, policy NE1 of the local plan states that development will be expected to deliver a net gain for biodiversity and be in accordance with the mitigation hierarchy. This is echoed in paragraph 187D of the NPPF. The intentional unauthorised development which has been carried out has resulted in a net loss for biodiversity. However, County Ecology were consulted on this application and provided a stance of no objection. So turning to the planning balance, local plan policy GP2 when concerning Greenbelt development states that proposals will only be permitted if they are compliant with national policy. The NPPF states that substantial weight should be given to any harm to the Greenbelt. Inappropriate development should not be approved except in very special circumstances, which is also echoed in policy of the PPTS 2024. Very special circumstances will not exist unless the development's harm to the Greenbelt is clearly outweighed by other considerations. Section 9 of the committee report identified the harm to the Greenbelt arising from the application proposal. The harm to the Greenbelt is substantial, and a net loss for biodiversity has occurred. However, the Council does not have a 5-year supply of deliverable sites at this time, which carries substantial weight in favour of the application. A new local plan should resolve this current issue. Until then, however, the means of addressing the identified shortfall will be through windfall proposals such as this. The intentional unauthorised development is a factor which weighs against the scheme. However, the proposal provides the applicant and their family with a home within their cultural links, which carries substantial weight in favour of the application. As mentioned previously, there are 4 children present on the site. 3 of the children are in education in their local area. One of the children on site has complex medical needs and as such attends a local education establishment to suit their requirements. 2 of the adult occupiers of the site also have medical needs. A settled base would allow them security and consistent access to general health care and education to meet their individual needs. These factors carry significant weight. However, the personal circumstances taken with the identified unmet need are not sufficient to justify the occupancy of plot 19 on a permanent basis when weighed against the harm identified to the Greenbelt. As such, very special circumstances are not demonstrated to outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt for a permanent period. However, turning to a temporary permission to authorise use of Plot 19 for a 5-year period, it would still be inappropriate development during this period, and this should continue to be afforded substantial weight. However, owing to the level of personal circumstances which have been demonstrated and the advanced needs of some of the occupiers of the plot, coupled with the council's unmet need, this would outweigh the harm identified for a temporary 5-year period. As Plot 19 is set against the top road frontage, it is partially screened by existing hedgerows and is not in a prominent position set back from the road frontage, such as the plots further south. Therefore, the harm arising to the Greenbelt after June 2028 is limited compared to if the plot was located further south within the overall Top Park site, as its impact will be greater in a more prominent isolated position. This point was made in the previous appeal decision for this plot. The time period for the temporary permission which has been recommended is made in line with the educational and medical needs of one of the children on the plot. Therefore, very special circumstances necessary to justify the development for the time period have been demonstrated, as noted in the previous appeal decision for the plot. The previous matter relating to a suitable access being included within the applicant's red line boundary has now been alleviated. There have been no other considerations which have arisen since the previous appeal which would alter the temporary permission which is recommended. Therefore, the officer recommendation is that application R240978 be approved for a temporary 5-year period subject to the conditions and informatives as set out in the draft decision notice appended to the report, and the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment being given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the conditions and informatives as outlined in the draft decision notice. Thank you.
In terms of technical questions, can we limit those, please, and then move on into debate? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, as the Chair quite rightly says, we have debated this before and quite to a level. If I recall, and it was 2 or 3 years ago, so I may be wrong, I was argued up at the time to 5 years on the basis that it needed to be 5 years because that's how long it was take before the local plan came in. And I was arguing for 3 years only. Now, I think you've raised another reason why it was 5 years, but I think that implies that it becomes out of timing for the rest of the site. And that, to me, creates a complication. So could you just, if possible, clarify that?
Yes, through you, Chair. You are correct. The recommendation for the time period is longer than the other sites that have been approved on, other plots that have been approved on the site, sorry. However, in the appeal decision previously for the site, this plot contains an occupant who has a lot more advanced personal circumstances compared to the occupiers of other plots. There's a child who has medical needs who attends a local school suited to their requirements. And the previous appeal decision, the inspector made strong reference to the fact that whilst they would have granted a temporary permission until June 2028 for the other plots which have been considered by the committee, they made clear reference to plot 19, and because of the occupier of the plot, instead of providing it until June 2028 in line with the rest of the site, they would have done it more in line with the needs of the child. And the 5-year temporary permission which is recommended is essentially in line with the time that the child will be at school until they reach an age of 18. So that basically is the position of the council. And in terms of the Greenbelt impact, in line with that recommendation, because the plot is situated right at the front of the site, should the rest of the site be removed after June 2028, this plot wouldn't be isolated 20 metres back, let's say, from the road frontage. It would be set to the front, screened by the hedgerows. So the impact on the Greenbelt in its own right compared to other plots in their own right is less because it's set next to the road. So essentially it was a joint exercise of both the needs of one of the occupiers and the lesser impact on the Greenbelt that this specific plot creates. And I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've got 2 questions. One specifically for our legal officer and the other technical points within the report. All material considerations. The first is, we know that in the officer's report and in the inspector's report that was refused at appeal, an injunction does not prevent a planning application coming forward. But it hasn't been explained properly at the last couple of meetings. If that application can come forward prior to any development taking place, or because even in the inspector's report, it didn't mention anything about retrospective applications. It only meant an application where the land is still virgin and it's not been built upon, and yet does the legal officer get my sort of train of thought on that one? Because I want to get to the point where if the development had been taking place without approval, with the injunction on the land, did this authority have the right to clear the site and get it back to virgin land again? Because that is the most important detail. Otherwise, what is the point of having... Yes. Right, that's it. That's it.
I would have to look at the judgment and what's said, because if it's very often in judgments, if it's not specifically addressed, a point is addressed, it's because it hasn't considered it. And although that sounds like a cop-out, it really does mean case-by-case basis. So sometimes there's not a general principle established in a judgment simply because the issue that you discussed hadn't been specifically dealt with there. And so it has to wait for another case or another set of circumstances to make a definitive judgment. And that's how case law is, unfortunately. So I wouldn't be able to answer that without looking into the detailed judgment to see what was exactly considered and whether retrospective applications was also considered in the dicta of the judgment that was made, which can run into pages and pages.
Okay, so you're not going to get an answer to that one as such.
I wouldn't be able to answer it like straight away. That's what I'm saying to you.
The other question is, for the officer, does it comply with the design code? And the other thing that this yeah, but this is an important one actually. That was a bit light-hearted, that one, obviously. But the important one is this: other authorities have dug deeply into the applicant to find out what other properties they own, whether they've got pitches elsewhere, whether they own bricks and mortar, because we don't seem to address that point at all with any of our reports, because somehow there's something, there could be something there that would make the difference between very special circumstances and no special circumstances, because they already own something somewhere else. So that's an important detail.
So in terms of response to your latter comment, the LPA have no evidence of what the applicant owns elsewhere, whether it be bricks and mortar or another plot elsewhere. It's just the application that's before us, essentially. We don't have those personal details.
The report mentions that there is a recognized need for the gypsy sites. So how there is no alternative solution then?
Through you, Chair. There's no potential allocated sites, I believe, at this moment in time. So the only way of addressing the identified shortfall is through windfall proposals such as this that come forward to the council. However, as you'll be aware, the new local plan is in process, and the identified shortfall is seeking to be addressed within the new local plan. But until that point, we have nothing to sort of go off. We have to assess application on its own merits.
In terms of the very special circumstances regarding the child with medical needs, what makes this more special than another child in a different setting with a medical need?
Through you, Chair. So specifically to this plot, the LPA have been provided with both letters from a local school and from local medical establishments as well, which identify that there is a child on the plot who has medical needs, and as such they attend a local school catered for special educational needs. So they aren't in sort of mainstream school as such. They attend a school suited to their needs, and obviously because of that, because of their specific needs, they are required to continue their attendance at school, essentially.
Is this a...
It is... Well, I think Councillor Carrador is is reason my mind is psychic. Now he's because
by having conversations between the committee, it's either to the officers or to the chair.
I would like to go for a recorded vote. That is the important bit. That's the thing. I think I've got a seconder somewhere.
No.
Thank you, Chair. I always feel obliged as kind of the relative newbie on this committee that I've not participated in the discussions on applications on this site previously, but I've watched them on YouTube, so I'm very familiar with the debate. And I think it's just it always seems to boil down to the fact that the current local plan does fail this community, and so we're left to address these kind of very difficult challenges. And I think I was going to ask a similar question to Councillor Edwards regarding the circumstances of the resident here, but thank you, officers have asked that, so thank you.
Okay, we'll move to the vote. I've had a request for a... To the debate. I thought we just had it. Councillor Picker.
To go first this time. I was expecting one of my colleagues to jump in. First thing I'd like to place on record is I think this is the 5th one of these applications on this site that's come before us in the last 3 committee meetings, 4 or 5?
It's the 6th.
6th.
In the last 3 committees, yeah. The last one, I may add, but...
So, and you've had them all. They've all been exceptionally good reports. They've very clearly laid out the issues that we have to consider as a committee. So I'd like to thank you for that, for all of them. This does feel a little bit like we're having the same conversations over and over again. Fundamentally, this is contrary to policy GP2. It's contrary to paragraphs 154 and 153 and 154 of the MPPF, and paragraph 155 does not apply. So for those reasons, this application should be refused.
Thank you, Chair. We have discussed this quite a lot in this chamber for a long time now, because this is the 6th one now. On every other application, we have the same issue. We have children in the property, and as a council, if we are going to refuse them being there, then we are throwing a home. We are throwing people out of their own home. There is nowhere they could be able to go tomorrow. So, taking this point seriously, as an organization, we should not break a home. We are there to support people to live happily. So, taking this into account, I am suggesting to go with the officer's recommendation to approve this application. Thank you.
I second that.
I think these occupiers have been in residence, for 5 years?
That's correct, yeah.
Simpson Vince.
Yeah, I'm going to second Councillor Picker.
Sorry, could I just ask if there's a third councillor, but I only saw councillors Gillius and then Picker. Okay.
We will go for the officer's recommendation first, I think. Against the recommendation.
Yes. Should be smooth this time. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Freeman. Councillor Gillius. Councillor Moran. Councillor Caridia.
4.
Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Picker. Councillor Simpson Vince. Councillor Russell. Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Srivastava. And Councillor Thomas. Okay. I have that as 7 to 5 for the recommendation. 7 for the recommendation, 5 against.
Have we any advance notice of site visits?
No further ones, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Appeals update?
Yes, for you, Chair. Members may recall we had an appeals update very recently, so there's actually only one update to give in relation to Appendix B. The Newton House Farm appeal was dismissed.
Delegated decisions? Motion to exclude the public under section 100 brackets A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972. Those in favour?